When my wife became pregnant with our first child, I was extremely excited. However, my daughter could not make her grand entrance without a prophecy being fulfilled. God said to Eve, "In pain shall you bring forth children." This prophecy of pain applied to all women, all over the world, whether in a primitive village or a major city, whether in the ghetto or the grandest hospital. Whenever a child is born, this prophecy of pain is fulfilled. Childbirth and pain are like Siamese twins joined at the hip. You can't have one without the other. The pain of childbirth is a universal reminder of what resulted from crossing the boundary that God had established. Well, the day arrived when my daughter was to make her grand entrance. My wife's contractions became regular and strong, so I put her in the car and we headed to the hospital. When we arrived, the contractions were even stronger and she was in a great deal of pain. She was shifting from side to side. When a person is in pain, no position is comfortable. It's impossible to be still when you're hurting. Pain makes you move from one relationship to another, from one drug to another, from one church to another. Pain makes you move. She was in labor over 20 hours. Eventually, the anesthesiologist came in and administered the pain medication. Gradually, ever so slowly, the moans subsided to the point where the room was silent, except for the constant beep that was coming from the monitors in the room. She just lay there, seemingly pain-free. As I looked at the monitor that measured the strength of her contractions, I noticed that the contractions were still strong, but she was lying there oblivious to the pain. You see, she was still hurting. She just couldn't feel the hurt because she had been given something to ease the pain. After a while, the groans and the body shifting that had once subsided returned, and it was not long before she was calling for pain medication again. The effect of the painkiller was temporary, and as it wore off, she was calling for more. The effect of painkillers is similar to the effect of water on the body. It's temporary. Water drink today won't quench tomorrow's thirst. You have to drink again and again. Water must be replenished to pacify the thirst, so do painkillers need to be replenished to numb the body to the pain. We live in a world that is so affected by pain. The pain of loneliness, the pain of being given away as a child, the pain of rejection, the pain of failure, the pain of sexual molestation or physical abuse. There are so many things that happen in life that inflict pain. I remember one day in our men's class, there was a fellow, we knew him as Junior. Junior was about 60 years old, unshaven, hair matted. You could tell he hadn't bathed in a while, and he reeked of hopelessness and pain. You could see it in his eyes, you could see it in his posture, and you could hear it in his voice on those rare occasions when he did speak. He was a man without hope, a man in pain. When you looked at Junior, you could tell that he believed his present and future were one and the same. I was told later that he lived in a car in a junkyard. Can you imagine living among junk? I believe that his environment was the external manifestation of an internal conclusion. He concluded that where he lived and who he was one and the same, junk. I live where I live because I am what I am. But I suppose that it can be said that we all at one time lived among the junk because sin is junk. But aren't you glad that being in the junkyard didn't stop God from coming to get you? God saw potential in the junkyard, so he came. One of the men in the group would pick him up and bring him to class, and we loved on him and did everything we could to minister to him and lead him to Christ. We rented a hotel room for him to take a bath and took him to get a haircut, dressed him in some nice clothes. He was extremely reserved and never really said anything. He would just come and sit in the class. You never could tell what he was thinking because his facial expression was always somewhat blank, empty, and void of any reason to connect with the group. We could tell he had a drinking problem, but so did some of us when we were in the junkyard, me included. One Sunday, the class discussion centered around fathers. As the class progressed, I could tell that he wanted to say something, but he kept quiet. Toward the end of the class, it was as though he couldn't be silent anymore, and he blurted and said, "You all are talking about your father and what he didn't do. At least you know who he is." I looked at him and could tell that this 60-something-year-old man was fighting back tears, and he was losing. He angrily said, "At least you know who your father and mother is. I don't even know, because whoever they are, they gave me away." He went on to say, "What kind of parents give their child away?" To him, that was the ultimate rejection. Countless times he must have asked himself, why did they give me away? In his attempt to understand that question, to find some justifiable reason, he must have concluded that there must have been something wrong with him. Surely they would not have given him away unless there was something wrong with him. So he lived as though he was the problem. In that moment, as we sat in that class, he seemed to articulate the source of his pain, and he had been carrying that pain all his life. I may be wrong, but based on how difficult it was for him to speak about it, I don't think that he'd ever mentioned it before. Maybe, just maybe, alcohol was the anesthesia that he used to numb himself to the pain and help him cope with a deep, debilitating rejection. Now you must understand that this is not a statement of justification, but explanation, because at the end of the day, we're all responsible for the choices we make. Your history does not excuse nor justify your actions. You don't abuse women because you saw your father abuse your mother. You can't use your history to justify why you mistreat people, why you abuse yourself, or even allow others to do so. There are people and situations that may influence your behavior, but what you choose to do is squarely on you. While we cannot ignore the power of our history to influence our behavior, our history does not excuse our behavior. All over the world, people are using painkillers to cope with their painful history. The problem with painkillers is that they don't heal. They just allow you not to feel, which itself creates a cycle of addiction and dependence. They don't satisfy the problem, they just pacify it until the next time. People are constantly using and losing, looking for some new thing to ease their pain. Whether it's alcohol, drugs, sex, pleasure, money, power, or whatever they use to create what to them is some level of emotional normalcy, people are looking for painkillers. If we combine the number of people using legal drugs, illegal drugs, sexual immorality, and alcohol as emotional painkillers, the numbers would be staggering. People are trying to create an altered state because their real state is so undesirable. They would rather use painkillers in an attempt to create a different world than live in the real world because reality is far too painful. People are hurting, and neither their profession nor calling make them immune from the appeal of a coping aid. However, painkillers come at a tremendous cost. We can look around and see the cost. Families destroyed, rehabilitation centers full, jobs lost, health decimated, and any number of things. We are so adept at adapting to our painkiller addiction. We learn to function while under the influence. I once knew a man who was one of the nicest people you would ever meet until he started drinking. The problem was that he drank every day. His wife would often say that when he got drunk, he repeated the same story. He grew up in a small town and he loved going to school. He loved learning. But his father allowed the other children to go to school, but he was not allowed to go. He had to work in the field. One day, while his siblings were at school, his father took him to work in the field and left him there to work. He was only about 10. His father said he would come back to get him. This 10-year-old boy worked all day, and when it was finished, he waited on his father to come. As nightfall came, his father still hadn't come, so he began to walk the miles it took to get home. When he finally arrived home, his father was seated at the dinner table. He said to his father, "Daddy, why didn't you come get me?" His father replied, "I forgot." When he would get drunk, he would say, "How do you forget your own son?" Alcohol was his coping aid. He always provided for his family very well, but the years of alcoholic painkillers destroyed his liver. By the grace of God, he came to know the Father who would never leave him in the field. Not long after he received Christ as Savior, his father came to the field and took him home. The truth is that we are all broken in some area and in different degrees of pain. While we may be broken in different places, we are broken nevertheless, and at the point of our break, there is pain. When you remember the break, you feel the pain. When you feel the pain, you medicate. The prophecy of pain to Eve was specific to childbirth. However, there is pain beyond the birth of a child. The question now becomes, since painkillers don't work in your favor, what are you to do with the pain you feel? How are you to cope if you cancel your prescription? First, I encourage you to invite Jesus Christ into your life. If you invite Christ into your life, that will be the first step in dealing with the pain in your life. Secondly, I want you to acknowledge that the pain is there. To acknowledge it is not a sign of weakness. You have to confess how you feel. Confess the pain. Confess the hurt. Did you know that a wound takes longer to heal when it's covered? But when you uncover the wound, it is exposed to the air and it expedites the healing process. When you begin to confess your pain, you open and uncover the womb so that you can begin the healing process. Jesus Christ is the answer, for he heals the broken-hearted and binds our wounds. You no longer need something to ease your pain. You need a healer, and Jesus Christ has come to heal you.